Hello and welcome to That Does Not Belong to Me. It is your host, Jamie, and we are here today with episode 44 of the podcast. And you know what? It's the last episode of the season. No big deal. No pressure to my host here. I mean, my guest. You're going to be the host. But there won't be any episodes coming out over the summer. And I just made this decision for myself because as much as I love doing it, it does take time, and it's something I do for free for my community. And I love doing it. I love connecting with the people I interview, but it's so important to take space from things even that you love. So without further ado, I have my host here. I mean, I'm just going to keep calling you my host. You're taking charge today, Jessie, okay?
I'll take it as an invitation.
Perfect. My new projector friend, Jessie Roy. Hi, Jessie. How are you doing today?
I'm very good. Yeah, it's Jessie Joy, actually.
Jessie Joy. Okay. I don't know why. It's Jessie
Yeah,
Jerome, right? Is that your last name?
Jessie
Jessica
Jerome. My last
Joy.
name's
Joy.
Jerome. Yeah,
I just threw an R in there for fun.
and my middle name is literally Joy. So
Oh,
yeah,
how
Jessie Joy is like kind of my nickname. So
perfect. I love it. I don't know you well, but that just seems to suit you just perfectly. Okay, so I don't know Jessie very well, clearly. I'm like making up your last name. But you were
new
sort of
friend.
introduced to me by our mutual friend Joe, who is my best friend's cousin. I love Joe. Just on Instagram, and he was like, "You should know Jessie." And I followed you, and then I followed your page, Soft Landings, which I love. Even just that name makes me feel at peace. So it's just so brilliant and so needed, I think. And then you ended up connecting with me not that long ago about potentially running a workshop at my yoga studio, The Well. So we'll talk more about that coming up. But I'm just super excited to get to know you through this podcast and to just see sort of where you've come from. You sound like you offer so many beautiful, it sounds like you've collected such a toolkit of like skills and gifts that you get to share with people. So I'm going to share, I never do this because I usually let people introduce themselves, but you sent me a few little beautiful, like kind of posters, I guess, about what it is you do and who you are. And I just feel like I want to read yours. So it says Jessie Joy is a multidimensional, no, let me start over. Multidimensional probably too, but multidisciplinary artist and creative visionary, a ceremonialist, pleasure activist, body liberationist, intuitive, psychedelic weed witch. I feel like so many of my community is already like, yes, tell me more. She is a fat, queer, neurodivergent trauma nerd who practices shamanic-informed earth-based ritual magic and loves to revel in the beauty, absurdity, and mystery of it all. Oh, Jessie has trained with the Center for Medicinal Mindfulness in mindfulness-based psychedelic therapy, specializing in cannabis-assisted psychedelic therapy. She is trained as a trauma-informed plant medicine facilitator and somatic integration specialist with Atira 10. Is that how you say it?
Atira
Atira
Tan. Yeah.
10. Jessie has been communing with cannabis alongside practicing and studying various modalities in movement, yoga, voice, and breath work for over 25 years, yet you look 27 years old.
I started it too.
Okay.
We all did. We all started at birth. No,
We
I am older than
totally
that,
did. Okay. Including a degree in theater performance and most recently in body temple dance facilitation and ganja yoga. Jessie's magic is in slow, grounded medicine work where they create soft landing spaces for human beings and bodies who don't always feel safe or seen in traditional so-called wellness spaces. Man, I'm so excited to have you as the grand finale. Again, no pressure, but I'm like, just with all of this, like, just feel like I'm in good hands right now. So you are the host.
Ooh.
So
I'm
when,
so honored. Thank you so
yeah,
much for having me on your finale. This is
yeah.
exciting.
So when I read that out loud, I mean, you obviously wrote that, and that's all your accumulation of everything you've done, and probably you've done obviously so much more. That's something, of course, Miley has things to say. I'm gonna just pause for a second because I don't want to
Sure.
ruin this. Hold on 2 seconds. Something I like to do for people that I'm like coaching is for them to look back on their life. And I mean, it sounds kind of obvious of like, look at your inventory of what you've done, of the classes you've taken, of the education you have, of the experiences you have. because you have so much power. You have so many gifts right now. Like you don't need that extra course or that extra training or extra class to be able to offer something right this very second, right? But I'm just saying that because I feel like me reading this out loud and you hearing it, like does it make you feel like, wow, good job, me? Or like how does it make you kind of feel? Are you like feeling empowered by everything you have access to? Or yeah, what does it bring up?
It was really beautiful to hear you read that because I'm sharing it sort of like I'm at the beginning of this like sort of new phase of my life of offering different offerings and taking up different space in the world than I have, uh, publicly in the past. And so there's a little bit of nervousness around like, sharing all these different identities and like being claiming some of these titles and being like, this is who I am. And, I've had to like go through myself and be like, no, no, but I am that. Yeah, no, that's true.
Mm,
Yeah, no, that okay. So like, yes, I feel good about it. But even like the past few days, I'm about to publish publicly that bio along with some workshop announcements and stuff. And I've been like, do I want to edit? Is there anything I want to take out? Am I taking up too much space or
oh,
but to hear you read it back is like just very beautiful. And
mm,
I'm like, yeah, that's me. So yeah,
yes.
I do feel very like empowered by all the little pieces, the collection that I've collected. I'm a collector
Hmm.
of many things and definitely experiences and life tools is one of them for sure.
Yeah. And I'm sure you're not alone in
Yeah.
feeling like, eek, like, do I want to say this all out loud? And like you said, like, do I feel okay to take up this space right now? But I just think like part of what this podcast purpose is to empower. I mean, especially women in the field of entrepreneurship to know that like I always say to people who are like, well, I don't want to sell. I don't want to like, nag people or push to people like my offering and stuff. And I'm like, that's just unfair then, because then they can't access you, right? Like if we don't talk about it, if we don't share what it is we have available to us, even if we're nervous to do it, or even if we're like, eek, can I offer them what I, saying I can offer them, or all of that aside, like it's so important, I think, to make this world like just a better place overall, especially like the more women who share their voices and take up space, right? So it's like it's our duty. And I think when we can start to just like step into that, that's when our life shifts and everything around us just does at the same time. Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so true. And there is a bit of a reframe that has been necessary for me. And I think for lots of people, right? Like it has to be about, I mean, the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing right now is because I'm trying to fill a gap that I'm trying to create offerings that I think I would have needed when I was
Yes.
younger at different places in my journey. And I'm definitely coming at it from a very like heart-centered, integrity-led, like I know the offerings that I'm putting out into the world now are needed in the world.
Mm.
And even with all of that knowledge, it can be so hard to just be like, this is me. And like, I deserve to make a living with these. I don't know, all of the
Yes.
things, it gets very entangled. But what's really been helpful for me in this reframe is just really feeling into being in co-collaboration with um, spirit and with the universe and with my guides and with
Ah,
my plant medicine guides too. Like cannabis is one of them. And I just feel very empowered by that. Like it doesn't make me, I don't feel like I'm just alone. And it feels like I have a whole team and I have a lot of support in the not, I have support in my real
yes.
IRL body, fleshy people, but I also have support in the unseen realms. And that makes me, it fuels me. And yeah, it helps. It's a devotional practice. I have to remind myself that yeah, like I am I'm creating things that are needed in this world. So
Absolutely. Oh my God, you make
yeah.
me almost, it was a very shivery moment and almost make me want to cry because I just feel like and I've talked about this recently, but I got given a tarot reading not long ago by Natalie Vancier, who was in a past episode. And she started by guiding me through meditation and got me to connect with my spirit guides and my ancestors. And I know I've like heard about that. I've taken trainings and like meditation courses and stuff where we talk about that. But I feel like for some reason with her in that moment, I was like, oh, like they're there for me, you know? Like, and then I had this other experience at the well, which we're running again at the end of April, where it's a woman who kind of channels your spirit guides and answers your questions from them. And so I had that recently. And again, I was like, man, we have this support squad that, like, you know, yes, in real life, those real people too. That's so great. But like, and because a part of that too, I think, is like, it's them, but it, like you said, it's this co-creation, right? Because it's you too, and they allow space for you to actually hear yourself too, as opposed to just being like, what do you think I should do, friend? And then your friend tells you what you should do, and then you do that, right? So I don't know, I feel like there's just a little bit more like play with helping you make decisions and guiding you on the path that you're meant to be on. And so this is like kind of new to me, and I feel like you've come into my life for a reason at this moment. And even this morning in yoga, someone said to me, you know, because I have these swollen lymph nodes going on with my lymphoma, and she was like, you need to be having like cannabis tea or something like that. And I was like, perfect. I'm going to learn everything I can from Jesse. But those doors are kind of opening
Yeah.
to me too. And I'm very excited to just like step into that more like natural realm and everything. So, yeah. Okay. So there's so much we could talk about. But first, I just want to know, well, sort of what took you to where you are. So, like, what, you know, when you were in high school, what interested you? And then did you go to typical education, or did you go a different route, or just kind of what was like the streamline of your journey?
Yeah, sure. Well, I will say that while it's been a winding road to like get back to this reclaiming of witch and titles like that, I have always been drawn to these places. Like I remember as a kid, like I love bookstores. Bookstores are like really one of my safe places. Like I just feel so like held. Like I love the smell. I love the feeling of being in a bookstore. So I always like went to bookstores as a child. It's very nerdy. Um, I still am. But I would sneak off to like the esoteric section, like the witchy self-help sections of the bookstores. And I'd always be like looking over my shoulder, like nobody sees me, right? Like my parents can't see me,
Were
like
you
they
in
don't see me looking
Toronto?
at these like witchcraft books. I was born in Toronto, but I did most of my growing up north of the city. So it was like
Okay.
more of a rural town. It was like yeah,
Mm.
farmland area.
Where no one was a
So
witch.
yeah, well, I mean,
No one
many people are
outwardly.
witches, but
Yeah.
no, exactly. Yes. Yes, it was not like, and it wasn't what we have now. Like, there's like a
Mm.
big resurgence, and it's like, Insta witches, TikTok witches,
Yeah.
which is awesome. I'm like, yes, spread it. Everyone, like, let's get out there and play with magic. Play with
Mm.
magic,
Yeah.
But I was always very drawn to these spaces, and like my favorite game as a young child was like literally I called it witches, and we would like build forts in the forest, and I'd like take old pots and pans and like be like I'd make medicine. I'd be like, I'm making medicine. It'd be like twigs and leaves and mud and so I'm like constantly dazzled by that. I'm like, wow, children really know. They know
Oh
what
my
they know
God.
what they need to do.
Can I just share that I
But
used to do a similar, and it's so funny because I used to in the bathtub make little potions with the like body wash and everything. And we had like sliding glass door. And I used to pretend I was working in a senior's residence because I would spend time like I'm visiting my grandfather. So I think that was just part of my life.
oh,
But now that I'm thinking
so
about it, at the
nice.
time I was like, oh, it's medication. But I'm like, oh, I was fully being a witch. That was actually the thing, you know?
You're making
Yeah,
potions.
exactly, to heal them.
Yeah, healing potions. um, yeah, I mean, high school was a challenge for me. I was also like super artsy. I was drawn to, I had a lot of art practices and I was involved in theater, but I was also, I was fat and I was bullied relentlessly as a child, throughout like grade school. High school was really hard for me. You know, and I did get involved in drugs and drug culture at a really young age. I lived in a small town and you know, sometimes there's not anything to do. And I went to a high
Mhm.
school that was known in Ontario as one of the like highest LOL. But yeah. Had the worst, like a worst drug track record, one of the worst
Uh,
high schools in Ontario. But so I did find myself in those spaces, and now where I'm at, like where I work with people with cannabis, and a lot of the time when I ask about their stories, this is really common, right? Like a lot of teenagers get really involved in like smoking weed and cannabis, and it becomes like a crutch, but and it be a lot, but I'm always very affirming with that because it also is, I mean, it got me through like really hard years, you know, like
Mm,
maybe that was a not in some ways supportive relationship, but on the other side, it's like it helped me to it, you know, lubricated my experience of like a traumatic teenagehood and was really a friend to me. And yeah, it can like kind of take you into fantasy land or like dissociation land, but that is a coping mechanism for like when life is real hard, you know, so there's no shame
yeah.
in that. And um, yeah, I got really involved in theater. At the end of high school, decided to go to university for art, and I went to University of Victoria. And actually, I took a year off first, and I traveled a lot, and
Mm,
that's always been like a big part of my life too, just like the call to adventure. And I wasn't quite ready to. I was like, I don't know, like, what do I need to go to school for? Though I knew that I was supposed to go to school, you know, like
mm.
I had to go to university. Um, but I ended up going to for a Bachelor of Fine Arts, and I only did a year in that program at UVic. I just did not find it just didn't feel right to me, and I was quite miserable. I didn't feel really welcomed into the like that space, the art scene there. I was taking video art and sculpture, drawing. And then in my second semester there, I took a theater class, and I had always been really involved in theater in high school. And that theater class saved me. Like it just
Mm.
brought me so much joy. It was the thing that made me the most happy. That was the class where I was like, oh, and then I was like, why did I think that like I didn't even consider going to school for theater, even though it was like really my main passion through high school. I just was like, well, that's not a thing for me, you know, being in a larger body, being like, I was like, you know, theater, like that's not, I can't take up space as an actor or something, you know.
Mm.
But I ended up transferring. I went from 1 year at UVic doing a BFA, and then I ended up moving to Halifax, across the other side of the country, going to Dalhousie University and studying theater. And I wasn't sure at the beginning, it's like sort of like an open track, right? It's like everyone takes the same classes. And then in second year, you go into either like the acting program or the theater technical program, design program, costumes, whatever it is. And I had thought I was going to go into the scenography program, the theater stage design, because that's just something that I had a background in just with my family had a production company, and we're both like sort of like theater people. And I grew up backstage, and like they were like corporate productions, not like
Okay.
you know, theater, but like my dad did like corporate theater, kind of is what we called it. So I would like work backstage with them. So I had a lot of backstage experience. So I actually, because of that, got asked to be a stage manager in my first year, and which was like first years didn't get to be stage managers
Ooh.
usually. But so I spent like, you know, day after day sitting at a table with my binder and the script and watching the actors on stage playing and running around and having a good time and doing all these exercises. And I was just like there taking notes on my binder. And through this process, I was like, I want to I want to play. Like I don't want to be sitting. I kept being like, I just want to
Yeah.
get up. I want to like go and move and play. And so I decided that I would try out for the acting program, and I got in. It's a very
Mm.
small cohort of people, and yeah, so I did my degree in theater performance, and that changed a lot for me, and like was a big journey in like my body journey, as far as like becoming embodied or like working with the body and being seen and taking up space, staying on stage and using my voice and dancing and movement class and leading these spaces. And there's lots of challenge there, but it was also like a really beautiful learning space.
Mm.
Um,
Did you have it in
yeah, and
mind, like when you went into that? Were you like, this is what I want to get out of it, like in terms of what would lead you to, or you didn't care, like you were just like, this is where I'm drawn to, this is what I'm passionate
I
about.
really wasn't sure. I
Okay.
mean, I've always been envious of those people who were like that's what I want to do. That's my goal. This is my life path. Like, I am going to be that. I'm going to do it. And I was like, when I was younger, I was so envious. I was like, you're so clear. Like, I don't
I
understand.
always think
Like,
of those
what
people
is
going into
that?
nursing school, like in CEGEP, and do their 3 years, and then they're like 22 years old and a nurse, and they could have their job for the
Yeah.
rest. They're clear on that. Like same. I'm always amazed by people just like knowing. I don't think that
Yeah.
could ever be me. Still
Yeah, and
not.
I had people, yeah, it's still not. Yeah, 100%. And I'm very okay with it now.
Yeah,
Now I'm like, I
exactly.
don't envy those
Exactly.
people. I'm almost the opposite. I'm like, that's got to be hard because probably, you know, stuff
Yeah.
didn't work out the way you thought it was going to.
Yeah, probably.
Or maybe,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
but yeah, I had like peers in my class who were just like, I've wanted to be an actor since I was a child, and now I'm here and I'm
Mm.
going to pursue. And I was like, okay, like I'm just here because I felt the call and now I'm here. Very projector of me, I guess, but very 3-5 projector of me.
Yes.
um, but yeah, and then after I graduated, I moved to Toronto, and I was amongst peers too, who like sort of like my classmates, and we all started pursuing acting things. And I just got very disillusioned and very quickly, where I was like,
Mm.
they were all going out for commercial work, TV, film, and I just really didn't see a place for me in any of that,
Did you have an
like there
agent?
was no, I didn't ever get an acting agent. No. I I just was like, theater called to me, but I also ended up, I was partying a lot. It was moved to Toronto. I ended up in this like orphanage home where there was like 7 of us living together, and slight exaggeration, but it was a kind of a wild time, and I was just like, I don't want to do like toothpaste commercials. Like, I'm not called to like do commercial work. And in film and TV, there was no representation. Like, there was no one who looked like me. And if they did look like me, they were the butt of the joke. They were like
Mm.
and I was not willing to do that. I was not called to like be the like fat friend who like made fun of themselves the whole time, or something. So I was working in a bar. I was started serving. I was working in
Mm.
an oyster bar. And then something fell into my life, which sort of changed the direction a bit. But I started modeling. I ended up getting signed to a plus size modeling agency, and I started doing plus size modeling, and that came really easily to me, like I didn't seek it out. I didn't ever seek jobs out. Jobs just came to me, and I looked around and like looked at my friends going to auditions all the time and struggling and doing, and I was like, that looks terrible. Like, I'm not interested in that. These jobs are just coming to me, so
That's
I'm just gonna roll
awesome.
with this.
Mm.
And then around the same time, I had a friend. We lived in this orphanage, as I said, and one of the orphans who were crashing on our couch for a few months, he was a producer in film, and he kept asking me. He was like, why did who did this? Like, your apartment is amazing. Like, it looks so good. Like, who? And I was like, yeah, that was me.
Oh,
And he's like, well, do you do set design? Like, um, do you do art direction or anything? And I was like, no, but I could. So he started inviting me out to jobs to be like an assistant art director. And eventually the stars aligned in my schedule and whatever. And I was like, sure, I'll come out. Like, yeah, okay, I'll be your assistant art director on this music video. And I kind of took over that project. I just was like, step aside, let me, what, I know I'm going to do this. And so by the end of the job, he was the art director on it, but and I was sort of his assistant. But he was like, you know what, we talked, the director and I talked, and we think that you deserve the art director credit.
mm.
um so they gave me the art director credit on my first job on set
That's
ever.
amazing. So you were seen
And
and recognized,
that's right. That's right.
which
Answered the
projectors love.
invitation.
Yes.
And when I started working in film in this way, in like production design, art direction, set decorating, it was a revelation to me. Like, I was like, holy holy, I won't say a swear word, I
It's
guess,
okay,
but
you can. You definitely can.
um,
Holy
this
shit is what you
is
wanted to say, everyone.
holy shit. This is a culmination of like all of these like pieces that I've collected along the way, you know. My mom is an interior decorator and I grew up helping her. My dad was like a producer, like a like, you know, production
Yeah,
person, and I grew up helping him. I went to school for art and sculpture and drawing, and then theater and stage, and like knowing how to like really mine a script, and like all of these pieces came together in this way of like I can bring all of this, and it just like lit me up, and I started getting jobs all the time. Like I really did not try. I just
it's
like word of
amazing.
mouth, like that director started hiring me. I was like his main production designer after that. The same producer, he always, I was like his first call. And then it spread through that, and I just, that turned into a 10-year career arc in as a production designer in film. And what started in music videos culminated in, you know, feature films and um,
Amazing.
world travel. And
I'm guessing
I worked
you
really,
quit bartending at a
I
certain
did quit
point?
bartending.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. Eventually, because like the production stuff started taking over. And I was modeling throughout all of this as well. And eventually that kind of faded out. That's kind of its own story. But the agency I
Mm.
was with shut down. And actually, like the three agencies in Toronto that had plus size rosters all kind of like closed their plus division. So there was
Oh,
no real agency for representation left. So it just sort of phased out very naturally, which was kind of okay because being a model was never really my like dream. Like I said, it kind of just like fell into my lap. I wasn't like trying to be a model really. And it was hard to do that. Like you have
I'm
to
sure.
maintain, like your nails have to be perfect, your hair has to be perfect, and like you can't get any tattoos. And as you can see, I do like a
Yeah.
tattoo. So it was a bit freeing to for that to sort of like move out naturally and organically out of my life, and these other things were taking up more space, and I felt very alive in those spaces. So I was just following those calls. So I worked freelance for 10 years doing film production, working as a primarily production designer, which is sort of the like key person in the set world. You're a high creative. You're working with the director, the producer, the cinematographer to like create the
The
vision
vision.
of the
Yeah.
world to
Mm.
and I was very good at it,
Cool.
and that was very satisfying to me for a really long time until it wasn't.
I was gonna say, and then what happened?
I got really burnt out is what happened.
Uh,
I got really
yeah.
burnt out, and you know, I pushed myself really hard. It's a really like really ruthless industry as far
Mm.
as like the demands that it places on people, on bodies. And I have a lot to say about that, and
I'm
I
sure.
could go and on, but I won't take us on that tangent necessarily. But yeah, there's a high levels of toxicity in that space, and I got really wrapped up in it. And as we say, like inside, we're like the industry has claws. It's really hard to get out of
Mm.
it, and there's a lot of ego involved. You know, like there was a lot of bonuses. There was a lot of perks to that job. There was a lot of like things, and my identity was became very wrapped up in it. And I poured so much of myself into that work that when I eventually distanced myself from it, like there was a lot of work there that I had to do around like why who am I without this, and like am I really gonna like walk away from something that I tried poured so much of myself into.
But I imagine you lose your
um
soul a bit, right? Like you lose yourself in it, right? Like it would be hard to know like what your true values are, or who you deeply are just by being so invested in that world. Like you said, the ego plays a big part. So yeah, it
for
must be like a
sure.
revisiting of yourself after, like a refinding of yourself.
Yeah, what I found was that like I mean, I was very drawn to like the soul work of it all, and that is not where you make money. Like I was never really like made that much money doing this work, even though people think like you have a career in film, like you can make so much money. And I saw like the trajectory. I'm like, I know that if I stick with this, I was making good money towards the end, you know, and I was finally like, I got to a really good place where I was like getting really amazing offers of jobs and I was like in demand. I had a really big reputation and I, you know, had built teams and all of these things. But I found that I had to be just a certain version of myself. It demanded to me being like this very specific avatar of me, which is inside of me, but it's not all of me. And because it takes up so much space, like I honestly had no time for, you know, relationships, friendships, family, like life, like would like fall to the wayside because I'd be working like 20-hour days constantly, consistently, all the time,
Mm,
like 7 days a week for months on end. And like that is obviously, I mean, there's the physical aspect of it, which is actually what took me out, really. But alongside that, like I was dying inside. Like I was like, there's parts of me that I've had to shelf and put away, and there's no space for them. Like there's no time for self-care. There's no time for spirituality. There's no time for like any of that. When you're working, you're working. And I'm just like, and I was, you know, there's a lot of pressure and stress, and really what took me out was this like capital B burnout. That what I've learned since then is like you actually like your brain changes, you know, the neurology of your brain like totally shifts. And I truly, after like this really big spell of burnout, which was in 2019, was sort of the um place where I broke.
mm,
I like my brain does not work the same way after than it did before. My body doesn't work the same post than it did prior. Like a lot of things shifted and changed, and um, I just really had to step back and be like, what are my priorities here? Because this is not sustainable. I'm not happy. My life isn't a happy life right now, even though, like, from the outside, everyone's like, wow, you have such a cool, exciting life. But I was miserable. I was
yeah.
miserable and just
Mm.
burnt to a crisp. So,
So then
yeah,
2019, I guess you like stopped cold turkey kind of.
I did these two back-to-back shows, which were both like two of the hardest jobs I'd ever done in my life. And afterwards, my like cycle was often like I would, you know, sign in to like go on these jobs. I'd sign out from the rest of my life, be like,
Yeah.
goodbye, family, goodbye, friends, see you on the other side. And then I would like dive into work for however many months I'd agreed to. And then I would have that was my like, I joke that as like my zodiac, like the triangle, my top three, like that's like my Capricorn spot where like my Capricorn sun really shines. And then I would like take a time out where I just like lay in bed for a week and like eat pizza and smoke a lot of weed and just like nap and like delight in bed zone. And that was my Taurus section. And then I would be like, I need to go out and like change and have adventures. And then I would like travel and spend all my money. And then that was my Sagittarius moon. And then I'd have to come back and do it all again.
Yeah.
But after this, after this 2019 spell, I could not get out of the low. Like there was like
Mm,
a low that happens after, you know, your body crashes, you're running on cortisol and adrenaline to like manage to be able to do it. And then your body crashes naturally. And I just like was in one of the darkest, like deepest depressions of my life in that point. And I started going to therapy again and
mm,
just trying to be like what's going on here, you know? And so I didn't necessarily stop cold turkey, but I knew that things had to change. I knew that I needed to sort of shift and reprioritize. But I was like, I don't know, like if I'm not doing this, what am I doing? Like, what is it that I want to do? What what calls to me? And I just found myself, I kept saying, oh, like, oh, I don't know, like all I want to do is sit around and talk about psychedelics. And I was obsessed with I mean, I always have been like a bit of a psychonaut, you know, like experimenting personally. And that's a, you know, a whole other part of my journey. But like I said, like this life didn't make a lot of space for some of those things. But I was really nerdy. I'd read all the books, I'd listen to all the podcasts about psychedelics. And I was also very my capacity for listening to just like straight white men's voices tell me what it is was like low. I had like a very low threshold, and like all of the good podcasts about psychedelics were just straight white men talking to straight white men about psychedelics. And I was like, where are all the other voices in the space? Like, I want those voices. I was like, where's the like queer witchy feminist podcast about psychedelics, you know? And it couldn't find it. It didn't exist. So I was like, you know what, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. Maybe I'm supposed to make this podcast. So I started making a podcast, and that was my big thing. I was like, I'm gonna do it. And then my whole plan was that I was going to bank a lot of hours, bank a lot of cash. I was going to do commercial work, which is commercial work when it's like fast and furious. You get in,
Okay.
you get out. It's like a week, 2 weeks, and you can make a lot of money, way more money than you can doing like art house cinema, which is like
Yeah.
what I prefer to do from a soul place, from an artist place. Um, but I would do commercials to sustain me through those other jobs that didn't pay a lot. Um, so my plan was I'm going to do a bunch of commercials, and then I'm going to go on this epic road trip in 2020. That was my plan. I'm going to go on this road trip across, and I was going to go to all these psychedelic conferences, and I was going to meet people, and I was going to interview them in person. And that was the
2020.
thing. 2020. Yes, the humbling of 2020.
Yes. I was gonna say, what did you create from that experience, from not being able to do all that, I guess.
Right, right. So when the big shift occurred,
Yes.
I immediately was like, well, at first I was like, okay, they're saying I was on actually on a job when all this went down, working with, I don't know if you remember, there was like this 24-hour period where the NBA shut down, and that was
Yes.
like when people were like, oh, this is real.
Right.
Well, at the time, I was on a commercial shooting with some of the Toronto Raptors, and
Oh,
they had been quarantined because they were one of the first like teams that got quarantined and this during this time. So I remember that day, I was like, I had like teams on the road, I had trucks on the road. We were like building a set on a soundstage, and my producer called, and he's just like, so the Raptors are quarantined, so you just need to like shut everything down, put it away, make safe, and go home and bill me like the job happened. And I was like, what? What? So I found myself like sitting in parking lots a lot that day, just being like, what am I supposed to do right now? Like, I really don't know what I'm supposed to do right now. So like, well, they're saying like a 2 week quarantine period. So I guess I'll go home and like pack a bag, and I'll go crash with my family for a couple of weeks. They live in a big, beautiful house in the country. I live in a small 1 bedroom apartment in
mm.
Toronto with no outdoor space. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go there for if we're doing a 2 week quarantine. Well, that 2 weeks turned into 7 months,
Yeah.
and I lived with my parents for 7 months, which is not something that I had anticipated,
Yeah.
but a lot of beautiful things happened there. And I was at first very excited. I was like, I mean, not very excited. I was scared along
Of
with everyone
course.
else, but I was like, okay, the film industry is completely shut down. Like it really just like, went away. And I was like, well, this is my opportunity to like have a little like step away. And I already have this project that I've like is underway. So what a great time to I'm so happy. I was like, I'm so happy I have this project that I've already started, that I can like start pouring things into it and like more time. But as time went on, I was like, look, the foundation of my world has like gone. Like I don't have a career anymore. I don't have the industry shut down. I'm living with my parents in my mid 30s. Like I don't know where I'm going from here. I'm clearly like confused about like I can't, I was like, this is not the place to like build something from. This is not a place to like, I don't have any foundation. I felt like I had no foundation. Like I felt like I was kind of floating. So I was like, it's not really a great idea to like build a big new project from a place where a foundation doesn't feel like it exists. And I also really felt like I needed a break. And I had been desperately like needing that like way to break away from Toronto, to break away from my career. and to sort of like take a time out. So I was like, and also the internet became very noisy at that
Oh,
time, if
yes.
you
And
recall. It
just to
was
point
very
out,
much a sense.
yeah,
Yeah,
sorry. I just wanted to
go
point out
ahead.
too, your working hours that you were doing were like so misaligned with being a projector too, right?
Big
Like,
time.
yeah, so I feel like that burnout, I mean, not to say it was for good reason, but like it makes sense a bit.
Totally. And when I started learning about human design, like in the past few years, and projectors, this is a really common thing that happens with projectors, right? They get
Yeah.
burnt out like earlier than a lot of other people will eventually get burnt out in life if they're going on this at this like
Yeah.
pace, right? But I was definitely, yeah, feeding off of the energy of other people for sure to like push myself beyond my own like needs and capacity in a big way.
Mm.
And I will bring it back to, and a really important part of this is like my being raised, or not raised, I don't want to say, because that kind of puts the blame, say, on like my parents, not blame, but I
Yeah.
was socialized. I grew up in a fat body and socialized that way. And that carrying of like so much shame and so much like cruelty and hatred towards what I looked like created a big dissociation.
Mm.
For most of my life, like I did not live in my body. I didn't have a relationship with my body. I lived in my head, and like I didn't want to be recognized for my body. I wanted to be recognized for like my intelligence, my humor, my like creative capacity. Like this is who I am. Like this is who I am up here, like in here, not here. Like this isn't me. This is just a body.
Yeah.
Um, so I was very disconnected. So, the signals, I'm sure, were very loud before they were loud enough for me to take me out. I'm sure they were there, but I was not receiving them because I didn't live in my body.
Mm.
Um, and that all ties into the cannabis journey of it all as well. Because cannabis is one of the most powerful medicines for embodiment that we have access to. And it's a big part of my story for sure. But yeah, I don't know if I want to, if you, I
So,
don't know if you want me to
yeah, I
carry
would
on that
love
track
I
or
would
like
love to
go
hear a
back to
little
like,
bit of like maybe more so like how that plays into your life like right now or like anything you learned along the way, of course, but just like either what you or how you use it for yourself or how you guide others. I would love to hear more a bit about that.
yeah. So, I mean, throughout my life, like I said, I mentioned it, I started earlier, like with cannabis, and there's been ups and downs through that journey for sure. But in all of this, like living and like working so hard, like cannabis was really like one of the places that I could come and like really feel at home and relaxed. And I even just like my practice in at home would be just I would smoke a little bit, I put some music on, I would just be tidying or doing the dishes. And like as soon as that cannabis like hit in the body, I would feel the need to like, okay, I want to move, like I want to stretch, I want to get into, like movement, the body, creative flow. So it was the combination of that, like being alone, smoking weed, and like just like allowing myself to like feel into those spaces that helped me to reestablish my connection with my body, that
Mm,
helped me to become embodied. Like cannabis is embodiment medicine. And that's like really what I'm here to share with so many people. What I really want to emphasize in like my work around education and advocacy. I mean, there's a lot of offerings there, but for
yeah.
me, and I know that this is a really common story, not just like people who've grown up in larger bodies, but people, any kind of like body based oppression, like have a disconnect and like have a relationship because we've been taught to hate our bodies
Mm,
and to be dissatisfied. And when that's a big part of your story and a big part of the cultural story around your body, then you obviously start to hold that and inherit that, and like it gets really foggy. Is that mine? Is it like, where did this come from? I don't know. I just hate myself. Like,
Mm.
um uh sorry, I sort of lost my train of
That's
thought, but
okay. Yeah.
um
No, yeah. So
uh
how are you sharing it with others right now? Or like what sort of, what does that offering look like?
Yeah, so I do like cannabis journey work with people, psychedelic cannabis journey work.
Mm,
So I work either one-on-one, or I can do work with small groups or larger groups, with more holding, but like personally just me, we have to
mm,
work at the capacity of our nervous system. But I do so in what that looks like is I get together, and there's a lot of preparation work because I want to make sure people feel really like safe and held in that. We talk a lot about cannabis and about the cultural stigmas, personal history. Like, what are you
mm,
holding? What are you bringing into this space? Like, what's your relationship to this plant? What has been your experience? Because all of that can color our experience when we get into an altered state with something, right? And so we have to acknowledge all of this propaganda that has been fed to us over the past 80 to 100 years around this plant that has actually been a medicine to the human species for as long as we've been alive. For as
mm.
long as humans have existed, cannabis has been alongside us, and a friend and an ally, and offers so much. So um once that piece, like, I like, that's a big part, education and just like clearing the air and talking about it and sharing our experiences is a big part, just to like get ready to be in the medicine space with it. And then when it comes to actual journey work, we go in, and I set very like sacred space, and where it's held with lots of integrity and intention. And for me, like I said, my magic is like, I love to make beautiful spaces and like
Mm,
soft, and I want people to feel like they can just like be soft and expansive in these spaces. And so we do an imbibing ceremony where we do like we smoke together, and I depends where a person is at. Like, I definitely like to meet people where they're at, but for me, like, it is like a calling in of all the spirits and the spirit guides, and we set that circle, and then I do body scan work with people. So I'll do very like nice, luxurious, long like body scans, and play really wonderful music. And it's mostly like a solo practice. I'll be with people, but the it's an internal journey. It's all about finding stillness, finding that,
mm.
and like going within. And
Like a
so
form of
that's like the
meditation.
yeah, it's a form of
Mm,
meditation. And the thing about cannabis that really like makes this extra extra special as far as a psychedelic goes, because this is a practice, in the right now we're going through like a big psychedelic renaissance, right? Where like psychedelics are coming to the forefront, they're becoming talked about in mainstream. So many studies are coming out to like that are saying how powerful psychedelics are
mm,
in healing work, in trauma, and in all of these, you know, very like necessary spaces for us, as they have been like before it was shut down. Like, there was hundreds of studies done on all kinds of these psychedelic compounds to say how powerful they are in in healing. And so we're finally coming back to these, we're
mm,
like finally re-dipping into the space. And now psychedelic medicines are becoming legal in all kinds of places, decriminalized. But we already have cannabis, and cannabis is a legal substance here in Canada. So we have access to it, and we don't think of it as a psychedelic medicine.
mm,
But when you approach it with mindfulness and you approach it in this way, it is powerfully psychedelic. And the unique part of it is that it's what we call the somatic psychedelic. So, because cannabis interacts with our nervous system directly, it brings us into our body in a way that other psychedelic compounds, which interact more with our brain, cannabis is a body medicine. So, what
mm,
we find is when people are able to come to stillness to and find a state of relaxation, the medicine starts working in all of those places, like those deep held places, and you start to feel like it's a very it can be a really like powerfully physical sensation, lots of like electrical currents, lots of like weird twitching, shifting, like that are all involuntary, and that's all just like our body releasing on its own, releasing these like held places of tension, of traumas, of all of these things. And yeah, it's a really powerful
Mm.
modality, way of working with cannabis that like is very expansive and available to us.
I'm so excited to do this with you because I feel like it's so interesting when you tell your story. Like, I don't have the same experience as you, just in terms of, I guess, I mean, I have my own relationship with my body that, we all do,
Yeah, we
ups and
all do.
downs. And
Yeah.
yeah, but then now I'm dealing with this, like, this cancer that is making me like I feel like I'm someone who is connected to my body. Like I feel like I have been through the practice of yoga and all the work I do, and that's just really a big part of my who I am. And now I'm faced with this thing that's like telling me that something is up, that something is off. And I'm reading all these books like by Louise Hay and Carolyn Miss, and these books that are telling me that probably something emotional or past trauma or lack of forgiveness or all these things are causing this, like, this dis-ease, right, in my body. And I feel almost this like resistance to that because I'm like, no, I've done the work. No, like I don't have any huge dramatic experience or whatever. And it's like I probably do, or I do from a past life, or I don't know what, but I do feel like
Mm,
I just feel like I need what you're talking about because I think it would help me so much to, first of all, like drop out of my head about all of this shit, like, and all of like, even moving forward, I'm like such an in between person in between the worlds of like natural healing. And I've like, drastically cleansed my diet and everything. And then at the same time, like, I might need more radiation down the road, or I might need that. And then it feels very scary to say, like, no, I'm not taking that route. I'm going to go, like I don't, I'm in this like land of like, fuck, like, what's the right direction? And it's for me to decide, right? There's, like you said before, like all of these outer noises, all of this like loud stuff on the internet and from people who care about me and love me. I have to go in. So I just feel like, this is such a cool route to take or to try, to just like connect more with myself. And I don't know. It's like totally different,
yeah.
than the experience that maybe you needed to like to help you through it. But I feel like it could still help so many people, just to say, like, who are going through different bodily experiences or otherwise life experiences.
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. That's such a sticky place to be in. I really feel like, yeah, it's so hard to know. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't know how I feel about those, the say like the, you know, that it comes from this or that, like, you created it, I think that
Yeah.
can be really harmful and to
To put the
people.
blame.
I think there's, yeah, to put the blame. And I think there's probably some, I think everything's connected spiritually. Like, I think emotionally, I do think that our bodies are emotion bodies. They're like spirit bodies. There's like so much, and we carry trauma epigenetically. We carry trauma from past lives, from our ancestors. So like, I do believe all of that's true. And I also think that like being like, you caused your cancer is like,
Yeah,
can be really harmful and like not helpful. So
for sure.
it's such a sticky place. But yes, this is like for anyone, like connecting deeper with our bodies, with our own like intuitive knowings, like being able to like get in there and be like, clear the noise, drop in outside of the head and into the intelligence of the body. And that is one
Yeah.
of the main sort of principles of this work, is that we are trying to make space for the body to come to its own homeostasis, like the holotropic principle, that like our bodies know what to do. Our bodies
Mm.
know how to heal if we can get out of the way,
Yes.
if we can like clear the path. And it's really hard to get out of the way because that's where we live. We live in like all of these like grooves of habit and these things that feel like they're a part of us, but they are, things we've picked up, like,
Mm.
casts that we've put on ourselves.
I covered the
And
theme last week. My theme in yoga was surrender, and what I was like, I always like learn, like just dive into like Googling what is surrender, and like read different articles. And one of the things they said was like, surrendering doesn't happen from the mind, right? It's not from the mind
oh,
because the mind is constantly
that's it.
trying to help us, and the mind is trying to figure out the problem to get us through it. And at a certain point, like the surrendering part is actually really easy, but it's the build up to it because we're trying to just figure a way around it or through it or out of it. And at a certain point, it's like, you know what? Actually, the answer is just nothing. Actually, it's like it's the absence of strategies, right? It's the leaning back. And yeah, I feel like this would help.
Yeah. Surrender is huge. And I love that you brought that in because it's a really big piece of the cannabis work specifically in the realm of psychedelics. Because like a lot of these, like there's explosion of psychedelic treatment, right? And people are seeking, they're traveling to all these countries to go on like ayahuasca retreats or like
Mm,
psilocybin, bufo. There's all these like big medicines that like will it doesn't matter if you surrender. Like, I mean, if you're not surrendering, like it can make it harder, but like it doesn't matter. They're gonna like grab you by the scruff of the neck and like take you through a process.
yeah.
And that can be too much. That can be overwhelming to our nervous systems. And what cannabis offers is like we call it the consensual psychedelic because it really asks you how deep you want to go. And
Mm,
you will go as deep as you are able and willing to surrender. And that can come really slowly. It can come like the first time you do it, you're going to be able to surrender this much. And then the
mm,
20th time you do it, you can surrender this much. Like it's a building of a capacity. It's a building of a skill set of like, oh, this is safe. Okay, I can surrender. I feel safe with this person. I feel safe in this space. And it's not an intellectual, I feel safe. It's the body. The
mm-hmm,
body feels safe. Okay, like and then you get access to those deeper layers of surrender, and the deeper layers of surrender give us layers of expansion. Like the surrendering is the expansion. So
mm,
for me, like I love that, like about cannabis medicine. Like I love that it's not gonna like you know throw you off a cliff because you're standing at the edge. Like it's like gonna ask, like, do you want to jump with me?
mm,
Oh, you're not ready? Okay, let's sit down. Let's sit down and talk for a bit. Okay, you want to do that? Okay, like, and it's very gentle in that way. But when you're ready to surrender, it can take you to all of the places that the other like quote unquote big sexy psychedelics will take you as far as like expansion of consciousness, but it's going to do it in like a safe,
mm,
gentle, built way that is much, much better for our nervous systems as far as, trauma
yeah.
healing goes. So,
Well, I'm very excited to work with you. And so I'm curious, how can people work with you right now? Does it have to be in person? You were out in the Eastern Townships, right? Where you were?
I am in the Eastern Townships. We
Yeah.
didn't even really get to that,
I
how I
know.
ended up from Toronto to the Townships. But yes, I do find myself in the Eastern Townships now.
Which is about an hour
And so
outside of Montreal, just for those who don't know it.
yeah. And I'm very grateful to be here. It's been a really powerful gift of like this. I mean, yeah, I was fully invited here.
Mm,
I just followed the path, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful gift for me in my healing journey, and in all this. It's given me the space to do all this study and to shift my life towards this new path. And yeah, so I'm here. I love working in person. I really do. And I'm able to do it in the summertime. I have a beautiful tent. I have a big
oh,
canvas bell tent that I set up on the property. And that's where I really like to do my journey work. But I'm also looking for spaces in the area that are open to this work,
yeah.
that where I could hold larger circles and do more like group work. I think group one-on-one is amazing, and I love one-on-one, and I'm very open, and yes, I'm open to doing one-on-one work, and that's really necessary for different people at different parts of their journey. But group work there's so much power in group work, and being held in circle is an
Yeah.
ancient sacred part of our biology and very healing. So I definitely would love to find more spaces. It's been a challenge to find spaces that are open to a
Well, we
group of
will
people
host
coming and like,
you at the Wells. So I'm very excited. This episode comes out early May. So probably sometime around maybe end of May, just so we can get time to figure it all out. But stay tuned for that because
yeah,
definitely want to do that. And I mean,
it'd be
again,
awesome.
another guest where I feel like we could have just talked for like 3 hours, but I really am conscious of your time, Jesse, and of anyone who's listening. So I will just wrap it up with, and I will get you to share any last thing you want to share as well. But just I ask a
Yeah.
couple questions at the end. So one of them being is what makes you feel aligned, whatever that means to
Yeah.
you,
What makes me,
even.
I think what makes me feel aligned is when the universe really starts talking back to me, like
Mm,
when like the signs and synchronicities and invitations start like popping off. I'm like, okay, I'm in a flow right now, like I'm in alignment. And it's on a person, like it starts because I'm living in connection with my own intuition, and
mhm.
that's what makes me feel aligned. I'm like living into the deep yeses, and whenever I'm there and I'm like not sure, I'm like, did I make the right decision, whatever. But then like when those synchronicities and those little signs, like the universe literally will talk to me. And
Yeah.
when they start happening a lot, I'm like, okay, I'm good, I'm in an alignment, like,
Mm.
it's flowing.
And you have the splenic authority too, which is like really intuitive, right? It's following those nudges and those whispers. And yeah, the more you can connect to that, the more you're just like guided the right way, simple as that.
Yeah,
And
that's how
then,
it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You've got proof of it. And then the last question is what does not belong to you? Do you need clarity on that
Yeah.
question or do you feel okay?
No, I
I like to
don't.
just,
No.
okay.
It's very clear to me. It's definitely something that's, yeah, I would say shame, body shame,
Mm,
and like shame more broadly, but body
yeah.
shame, it doesn't belong to me. And that's been something that I've been working through a lot recently. Just like we're given I know that I hold so much shame in my body, like in my physical, like there's pockets of shame, and I just have come to the understanding that like none of that is mine. Like
Yeah.
that was given to me, that was thrown at me, that was like put on me, that was projected onto me. And I'm a sticky little spongy empath, like being who for so long did not have the self-worth to create boundaries, energetic boundaries around like, no, I will not hold those. So I just absorbed, 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 absorbed.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, release, release, release this shit that does not belong to me.
Yes.
Body shame does not belong to any of us. It
That's
doesn't
right.
just exist in nature, so it
That's
shouldn't exist
right.
in us.
Thank you. That is
So.
beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being so honest and vulnerable. And I've really loved getting to know you. And I'm really excited. I feel like, speaking of synchronicity, like you just feeling the call to reach out to me and then me inviting you into the podcast. I just feel like it's all flowing so beautifully. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. And I do want to just add that I can work online as well.
Okay, cool.
This does work online. So it doesn't have to be just in the Eastern Townships,
Good to know.
and that I do travel a lot for work.
Okay, so I'll
So
be sharing all your information
I'm
in
a
the show
traveling
notes.
mystic.
There you go. All right. Thank you so much, Jesse. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you for being here for these last 44 episodes. There will be more to come in the fall. So don't give up on us. And as always, I love connecting on Instagram and any of the platforms. So feel free to touch base with both of us. And I will see everyone very soon. Goodbye.